Avengers! Assemble.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Excelsior, the world's #1 Marvel's Avengers podcast. I'm your director, Christian Buckley. Joining me, as always, is the Apex legend, Jack Martin.
Excelsior, Christian. How you doing?
Doing good, Jack. Doing well. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm the director of a S.H.I.E.L.D. organization. I should have proper grammar. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Not too much Marvel stuff going on, so I haven't really been consuming a lot of Marvel-related content. Big into Book of Boba Fett. Book of Boba Fett. Again, what a roller coaster this show has been. I won't spoil it for people that haven't seen it, but
Sure.
boy, oh boy, lot going on in that show that I was not expecting.
Yeah, and I think we're getting ever closer to that Disney Plus ping pong schedule, where it's going to be like Star Wars show, Marvel show, Star Wars show, Marvel show, and it's going to be like kicking off and stopping as the previous one ends, where Book of Boba Fett has one more episode, and Moon Knight is still like a month away, essentially, on Disney Plus, with, as far as we know, nothing major in between. But yeah, I think this year there's a lot of Star Wars projects, there's a lot of Marvel projects. Do you see a world where they're releasing episodes like within the same week? Like, is there a world where Andor and She-Hulk is airing at the same time at different days?
I don't think so. I think the only way they do that is I think there was some overlap between Bad Batch and Loki at some point. And I think they would only do that for like an animated show and a live action show, which I feel like in terms of Disney Plus, the live action shows tend to be more like the focus and the animated shows are like secondary, not in terms of quality, just in terms of like how many people will actually be, viewing it. So I think that's the only scenario where like if What If season 2 comes out and like, I don't even know, whatever live action, like if Ahsoka came out and like What If was airing at the same time, Ahsoka would be the main draw, and then What If would be like, the secondary thing that just so happened to be happening that week as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. There absolutely will come a time, I think, where there's just so much that there will have to be, like Monday is Star Wars Day and Friday is Marvel Day, but we're not there yet. And
I want Fridays back, dude. Enough of this Wednesday garbage.
No, I hate it so much. Because the thing is, I typically waited until late in the day to watch Boba Fett, and then things got interesting. And I did it in the morning this past week without looking at my phone. Wednesdays is just rough because I don't feel as bad Friday mornings using that to watch a show. Like Wednesday morning, I gotta be productive. It's not a good feeling.
Yeah, dude, I'm waking up at like 6:30 like Wednesday mornings before work and watching it and then like having to get ready for work. It's just so much to do. And I agree, even if I would do the same exact thing on Fridays, but it's a Friday. Like there's a different feeling in the air when you're doing that. So, get rid of the Wednesday release. That's awful.
Yeah. I think we'll see some changes, hopefully, with the big title this year being Kenobi, but this isn't a Star Wars show, and it isn't actually a video game show, not a content show, but sorry, Avengers is kind of dead still.
Yeah, we're 4 minutes into the show, and we haven't even mentioned the game.
Yeah, Jack, on the dock, we don't have the mental fortitude today to go into this discussion. This might be a next week thing, but we'll get to that. We'll get to this, but I have feelings about where the game is at the moment. Why don't we go over what's actually new in the game right now, because it's not much, and then we can get to the conversation I wanted to have.
Sounds good.
Marketplace. Oh, great. Yeah, we got to start with this. So, new MCU suit in the Marketplace available today. It is Hawkeye's Endgame suit.
I have a feeling how you feel about this Endgame suit, and I feel like we're probably on the same page.
Paint a picture for me. What do you think I'm feeling about this? Describe to the listeners, the Agents of Excelsior, if they haven't seen the skin yet, what this is, because if you've been listening to every episode, if you play the game, the Hawkeye Endgame suit, that you're like, wait, that's an MCU Hawkeye thing. That's already in the game, isn't it?
Right. So that original suit that released a few months ago, maybe last year, maybe 10 years ago, who knows?
I think
In this weird time dilation we live in.
also I think important to mention. I believe that was one of the first MCU suits.
Yeah. So that was the one where he released they released a skin for him that was like the Black Ronin costume from Endgame, and he had his hood down and his hair was, not the cool mohawky hair, and people were kind of upset about that. So that's in the game already. And this is another Endgame Ronin skin, except he has his hood up and a mask on, and it is full price. And I think that is probably how I feel about this, where if this was like a 400 credit costume expansion, if I may, or like an alternate costume, or like an alternate, hood up ability that is like not full price, I feel like I'd be fine with that. But they're selling this at full price. And the base of this, I'd say 90% of this costume already exists on a different skin, albeit it is slightly different. Like he has more of like a vest situation going on in this skin, whereas the other Ronin skin is just like kind of more flat. But it's pretty much the same thing except with the hood and mask on. And it's another 1400 credit or $14 skin, which is kind of unreasonable.
I think the thing that makes it worse is the fact that this is so much. It's the same thing. It's a different version of the same thing, and this one's just so much better. And people bought into this one a year ago because of the excitement. Not a full year ago, but you know what I mean. Uh, like this feels like if they updated the hair on a skin and made you buy it again. I know it's not the same thing because it's like a different outfit technically, but if you're selling the Endgame Hawkeye suit, it feels like it doesn't feel redundant. It just seems like they're reaching or like double dipping or like asking people to do that. And it feels bad. It feels like this is just a slimy move, which
Yeah.
I feel like this game hasn't really had for a while. I know there was the whole XP booster fiasco, which I didn't think was as bad as people thought it was, but this feels worse than that did to me. I don't know if you feel differently.
It's like if they released the Captain America um, skin from Infinity War with the star and one without the star on his chest.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how it feels. Yeah, it's really silly. For people that bought that skin, I feel like they could feel very burned about it. I never bought the skin. So like if I had to buy one of them, it would be this one because it just looks cooler. But it's really unfortunate. I feel like for people who own the other skin, they should be discounted at the very least, if not just like a very free upgrade or like a cheaper like 100 credit upgrade to put the hood on. It's I don't know. There's no instance of there being like alternate skin variability in this game yet. So like they haven't done that yet. I feel like this would have been a good opportunity to be like, hey, if you already own this skin, like this is like an additional X amount, or this is just free with that skin. To sell this as a whole 100% new skin, like I don't know, it feels kind of not good.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm curious to see if anything gets walked back on because in the release tweet, I did scroll and some people were displeased in the comments. And I know people have been displeased about cosmetics in this game before, which led to nothing. But we'll have to wait and see what comes of that. So that is the bad news with the marketplace at the moment. Good news, a skin that I've been waiting for a very long time is available through shipments, and it is the Iron Man 3 Mark 42 majority gold, like very fair light gold Iron Man suit.
Yeah, dude. Before this recording, hopped onto the game, held the X button down for X amount of minutes, and got this in a shipment.
Hell yeah.
Very hyped about this. I think this is the most unique looking Iron Man's costume in the MCU. So for this to be in the game and for it to also just be in a shipment, where for me, I walked into the game at some point or another when they did a mea culpa with units. I was gifted 250,000 units. I've opened like the past 3 months of shipments with those, including this month. So yeah, I got my Iron Man Mark 42 and it looks dope.
I wish I had enough units to have this already, but unfortunately, I think I will have to go in and grind a bit for some, or not units, the green currency, whatever it's called.
Yeah, I think that's units, and then the blue is credits.
Okay, because it's weird. It's the same word, you know.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
But yeah, this is a great addition to shipments. I think I'm very surprised that this is in shipments. Maybe I'm just in the minority, and a lot of people think this skin isn't great and wouldn't be worth it. Like maybe their data on the Marvel side is like, oh, we wouldn't sell enough there, so let's just throw it in shipments. But
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
I love this skin. I was so
same.
hyped to like immediately get this.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this one. I never play Iron Man, but I would love to have a Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr. style skin for my team. In the rare occasion that I put him on my roster. So, very cool. We'll see what comes of that in the future for other shipment suits. We're, I think, 2 in a row now for shipments being MCU outfits, right? The last one was the Hawkeye Civil War outfit. So, we'll see what April brings. I did see on Twitter, people from the community were being like, hey, we have a lot of skins for some of these characters. Are we just done with Thor and Captain America skins? And people from the team were like, oh no, we got more Captain America and Thor skins, don't worry. So maybe we'll see the Thor 1 outfit. Maybe we'll see the first Avenger suit in a shipment. But yeah, I think it's nice that they are putting some MCU suits in the earnable or more easily earnable avenue being shipments.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I'm forgetting how to earn units.
Yeah, me too.
It's been so long. I think probably through like challenges, like the daily challenges, maybe. But yeah, eventually I got to go restock because I just got gifted like hundreds of thousands. So those are running out pretty quickly. It's like I think it's about 50,000 units because it's 500 units for one shipment, and if there's 100 shipments, you'll get the MCU skin. So it's 50,000 units to run through it all.
I don't know what the math is specifically, but is it like it's guaranteed to drop at some point before, and if not, it is the 100th, or is it like can it drop before 100, or what does it shake out like?
It can drop before 100. That's never happened to me before.
Okay.
I've always gotten it on my 100th shipment, but that is a possibility. So they say.
Okay, fair enough.
I won't say that they're lying, but
yeah,
it's it's like gambling.
Yeah, I mean like a 0.1%
but
chance is still a chance. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
So, lastly, in terms of what's new in the game, currently, not fully new, maybe new to you if you started playing the game recently. From today through the 7th of February, Corrupted Vibranium event has returned, and double resources, which unfortunately does not mean double units. That would be very nice, but...
So I actually saw a tweet that is included.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, that is
there
nice.
You go. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll do some challenges this weekend then.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look. Because that would be great. If I could, like, every month just be like, I'm going to jump into this game and earn 50,000 units. I don't know how difficult that is because I forget how to earn them.
Yeah.
But, that would set you up pretty nicely for next month's shipment, I would say.
Yeah. Seems like a good strategy. I hope it actually works out. I will experiment this weekend and report back next week. I'll see what my total hour or units per hour data looks like. But Jack, believe it or not, that's it on the blog.
I can believe it. It seems like a trend these days.
Yes. So that brings us to Stark Realities. No updates. The Stark Realities is that there's no updates. There's not even a updates header that says like we're working on the future of Marvel's Avengers. last week, I think, I asked you the question, when do you start worrying? That like we don't have a roadmap yet. And I think the conversation landed on like, oh, if it's like late February or early March around when the Hawkeye reveal happened last year, if there's nothing by then we'll be worried, right?
Yeah, I'm expecting February, like late February, and if we don't get anything by the end of March, panic mode. Break out the panic button.
I think that's fair. I will say I'm gonna get a head start because I think the fact that there's not even like one of those vague we're working on the future, like we had that every week in the fall. It felt like, at least, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like since War for Wakanda launched up until Spider-Man launching, they were like, we're working on the raid, we're working on the balancing, you can look forward to this in the raid. And I know there's no announced content they could be teasing or giving those like non-answer nuggets for, but like I don't know. I feel like maybe it's just me reading into the non-appearances we've talked about recently from Square Enix events and the fact that we are supposed to have a roadmap already. Maybe it's the idea that these kinds of games are expensive and a new hero, even if there's dialogue recorded, they just cancel the hero. That's possible. And I think you and I on the show have come to the conclusion that like when Marvel's Avengers starts to die, it will probably be bug fixes. The servers are still up, and they will keep releasing skins because clearly those make money. And we are currently in that point in time. I don't know if that's just because it's a drought or if it's like, hey, we tried. So,
Yeah. I mean, if this game dies, when this game dies, I should say,
yes.
I want them to just rip it off like a Band-Aid. I don't want, the drips and drabs of, oh, we'll get this and this. I would love for the next like big news announcement to be like, hey, this is the last year of the game. We have X, Y, and Z planned. And then after that, it's going to be small incremental updates, like what you said, skins and fixes here and there. But that's it. That is my ideal announcement for this game. Because, like, no way do I see this going successfully for more years after this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of hoping for something like that in February or March, which is kind of sad in a way. But I hope it's something like that.
Yeah. I think worst case scenario would be like the Anthem method where they were like, hey, we got stuff coming. And then they never talk about it. And then like 2 years later, it's like, so do you? And it's like, actually, today specifically, we decided the game is over. So sorry. Like, I'm with you. I hope that whenever we do hear about what's next, if we hear about what's next, and it's not just like a, hey, thanks for playing, but you already played the last content. If it is, we have this big thing coming up, or maybe not even a big thing, we have one more thing coming, or one more wave of things, and that's the end. I hope they make it very clear, because just like be open with the community, and I think they got to a point since the game launched where there seems like there's a pretty decent back and forth between the community and Crystal, which I think is really great and necessary for games like this. But it is a waiting game, and waiting games, the longer they go, and it looks like we got a couple more weeks ahead of us probably, the more unease there is on the side that's receiving or should be receiving things. So I think you're playing it smarter, but I'm beginning the stages of mourning this game at this point, I think.
I mean, that's very practical.
Yeah.
It's very practical because, yeah, you can't really root for this, or you can't really bet on this game like succeeding just out of the blue. Like it's done kind of well at various stages throughout its since launch, but yeah, it's not doing what Square has wanted. It's probably not doing what Crystal has wanted. So yeah, this will be the final year.
For sure.
I don't think that's too much of a hot take. I think that's just kind of reality.
Yeah, and this is a conversation I'm sure we will return to, and in the coming weeks, maybe we have a full blown in depth one about how we see it going down. But again, want to root for the game. I am rooting for the game. I think at its baseline, we're on the same page. It's a really solid, fun game. It just needs life support desperately, but we'll see if it gets brought to the game in the coming weeks. So that's it for Avengers. So meanwhile, got some interesting stories going on. A few are related to Spider-Man. Actually, most are related to Spider-Man. So let's start with the MCU forward one. Loki season 2 has been revealed to begin shooting this summer in the UK.
Nice. So would you expect this to be like a 2023 show, season 2?
I would think so, and I wanted to ask you the same question because we know Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is, I think, first half of 2023, and that will be featuring Kang. So do you think Loki season 2 pulls like a No Way Home Hawkeye, Kingpin, and Daredevil scenario, or we see Loki deal with the ramifications of where Kang ends up in Quantumania? Like, do you think these two projects will be linked? Because I'm with you. I think 2023, Kang's in both potentially. So
Yeah, I think certainly if they're releasing around the same time and also dealing with the same character, they'll be linked in some way or another. But as I say that, I don't know if it will even be the same Kang. We saw He Who Remains at the end of Loki, and it seems like Loki's meeting a version of Kang the Conqueror, and presumably Ant-Man and the Wasp is going to deal with a version of Kang. Maybe Loki got sent to like our proper MCU timeline and is actually dealing with the same Kang. But it's honestly really hard to know with them dealing with multiverse and things like that. So it's kind of unclear. But yeah, I think it'll be sort of two sides of the same coin for these two projects.
yeah, I agree. And I think as the time moves forward, we'll probably be able to slot in when we'll be seeing these other projects around each other, right? Like, I know we have a lot up in the air at the moment, like She-Hulk. We don't know when that's coming. We don't know when Secret Wars is coming, but as we saw with Moon Knight, I think they're probably going to start, at least with the shows, announcing them very soon to release, just to avoid any potential further delays. Now that we know there are more people that are preventing production from continuing as it should. So maybe that's just a future proofing thing. Maybe that's just a thing they want to get used to. But yeah, I'm excited for Loki season 2 for sure.
Yeah, me too. That was a really great season. I feel like it was one of the better MCU shows on Disney Plus so far. So yeah, happy to see that return.
Yeah, most consistent award goes to Loki, I
Yeah.
think.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So can't wait to see what's next. Speaking of, what's next for Kingpin? Well, we'll be talking about Kingpin a little bit in just a bit when we talk about Daredevil. But Vincent D'Onofrio was interviewed. He was asked if he's going to return as Kingpin again, if he wants to, and specifically in regard to Spider-Man 4. And his answer was basically the way he's been talking about Kingpin returning for the last, 6 years. He was like, hey, I want it to happen as much as everybody else. I love this character. So do you see a world post-Hawkeye seeing that Kingpin returning to our Kingpin we knew? Do you see a world where Vincent D'Onofrio gets the step up to movie MCU and maybe battle Spider-Man?
That'd be really interesting, especially if, like, was he? I know they've dipped back and forth in the comics. Was he a Spider-Man villain before he was a Daredevil villain? Do you know?
That's a good question. I feel like, with the exception of the Ben Affleck movie, my growing up as a child, I associated Kingpin with Spider Man. And then because of that movie, I was like, oh, I guess he's Daredevil's main bad guy, but he's in Spider Man's rogues gallery, you know? So I don't know if he was
Right.
first Spider Man or not, but I can look into that real quick.
Either way, I feel like he's equally as tied to Spider-Man as he is Daredevil,
Hmm.
especially recently. So I think it'd be really cool to see him in a live action performance against Spider-Man. We haven't really gotten that before.
Hmm.
And his character will certainly be changed if he returns. I think they're going to go the comic route that a lot of people have talked about, where he got shot in the face at the end of Hawkeye and is like blinded, I think, or he's somehow like physically altered because of that. So I'm interested to see how that affects his performance with the character. But yeah, I think it'd be really cool to see him in Spider-Man 4, because like Spider-Man's villains are very important, like in a way that Batman's villains are very important to him, more so than like other characters in the MCU or throughout comics in general.
Hmm.
So I think it'd be really cool if, for like a big bad for Spider-Man, if we did actually end up getting Kingpin with like
Hmm.
a litany of other villains as well.
I also think that Kingpin, specifically Vincent D'Onofrio, would work kind of exactly how Sony wants Spider-Man to be integrated with the MCU, where they want nostalgia tied to Peter Parker somehow, whether it be through Tony Stark or through old villains or returning Spider-Man, you know? So I think, at least amongst the fandom, there's a huge love and support for Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin. Like, he's a big fan favorite character in Marvel. So I think it just depends on how Sony views Vincent D'Onofrio's pull in movies, because he's been in some blockbusters before. He was in Jurassic World. So I could see him enter into a Spider-Man movie being a main antagonist or a side antagonist, and that could sort of bring in the best of both, where the fans are really happy because it's not this underdog story, but like a character we're all rooting for, and the actor and the performance we all like being brought in, and then Sony doesn't have to feel like they're pushing anybody on us of like, just let Spider-Man breathe, you know. And like you said, we've never seen Kingpin and Spidey in live action before, and very recently we were able to see MCU Spidey and a lot of his other villains in live action before. So rather than retreading that or being like, okay, we know you all love Alfred Molina, but here's MCU Doc Ock. It's like, okay, no, you all like Kingpin. We'll just do Kingpin. You know, like, I think that could be a nice balance for the direction that Spider-Man's been taking and what we all want to see.
Yeah, I also wonder. I presume that he's going to show up in the Echo show,
Oh yeah.
so I think that'll be a question like how much do they want to use him throughout the MCU as this villain in multiple projects. So we'll have to see about that.
Yeah. So I think it's something we will probably see at some point, whether it's the role Kingpin plays at the beginning of the Spider-Man Insomniac game or if he's a big bad remains to be seen. But I think we will see at some point Kingpin and Spider-Man on screen together in live action with these actors. So
Yeah, I think it'd be awesome.
another thing we might see on screen is, well, these two things are kind of tied together. You brought this up to me. Tom Holland voiced his support for an Amazing Spider-Man 3 today, correct?
Yeah, he was on a podcast with Brandon Davis, comicbook.com's Brandon Davis, and he asked like, "Hey, would you support a new movie with Andrew Garfield?" And Tom Holland was like, "Yeah, 100%. I'd support Sony's decision if they ended up doing that." He was like, "I think it was great that Andrew Garfield was able to like make amends with the character and also like win support of the general public back." So he, yeah, 100% supports that project if that were to be made.
Yeah, and I think it goes without saying, both of us want to see it happen too, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%.
He's great, and he's great as Spider-Man, and there's so much more to tell with that character. But I do think that, at least online, since that quote came out, I have seen some people maybe concerned or worried that it would be too confusing. But I feel like, especially lately, the general discussion around multiverse stuff and movies and multiple characters, like I feel like audiences are more attentive to that now than they have been before, where you can have three different Batman characters and we all get it, right? Like obviously there will be some confusion, but I feel like it's pretty clear that you can have a couple versions of the same character and they still perform well, right?
Yeah, and even for the people that don't get it, like they understand that there's a spectacle going on. Um, like there are people out there who like don't realize that like Batman's not a Marvel character or like Batman's not in the Avengers and things like that. Like people joke about that, but that's for general audiences they just don't know that. They think superhero is going to be in everything. So those people do exist. I'd say a lot of people like that exist, but I feel like they realize like in the marketing or whatever that there's going to be a spectacle to be had, so they just kind of go in and like try to get it. And I feel like they've done a really good job, especially with Noah Home, of making sense of that, like realizing, hey, this is not the same as our Spider-Man. So I feel like they've done a good job of explaining that, and it's going to be a few years of that going forward. So I think people are going to start to understand that more.
Yeah, plus specifically with Spider-Man, like with Into the Spider-Verse, which I know wasn't a huge box office like record breaker, but it has a lot of support vocally in people's hearts. Like Into the Spider-Verse is a great movie and people understand that concept that there's a multiverse, especially now with No Way Home breaking record after record, right? Multiverse storytelling is a thing that's here to stay, or at least here for the time being. And through Spider-Verse and now across the Spider-Verse, like it's making sense in canon. And there are people like us who are super in-depth to the canon and wanting to follow along and track the logic. And there's people on just the more casual side that's like, hey, in this marketing, I clearly see this isn't supposed to be here, but I like that thing, so I'm excited for this. And then you have people who probably get dragged along to the viewing, right? So they have layers of ways they can make it make sense. And the reason I say that is because there's another story today that I think could canonically make a live action Spider-Verse make sense and more likely than ever, even though we just got No Way Home, because Sony's greenlighting another Marvel project, which is a bummer because we've seen how those have resulted so far. But this one sounds really interesting. Dakota Johnson has been cast to star in a Madam Webb movie. And for those that don't know, Madam Webb, very heavily tied to the Spider-Verse. She is featured in the upcoming Across the Spider-Verse. She was in the Shattered Dimensions game. She was in the 90s Spider-Man cartoon.
That's the only thing I know her from is the 90s cartoon. And we'll get into it, but that's the reason why I think that's probably how they're going to deal with the Spider-Verse.
Yes, which again I'm conflicted because I love Dakota Johnson and I think like a Spider-Woman becoming Madam Web storyline would be super cool and could be really fun. It's also a Sony produced Marvel thing, so how does this track for you? Like, do you think this is something that's going to disappear into the ether, or is this something we might end up seeing?
I'm more confident in this than the Aunt May solo movie.
Sure.
So, or even the Electro solo movie, because I feel like she's going to be pretty integral going forward. I don't know. I don't like the idea of Sony making these big movies for these Spider-Man side characters. Like, they're so desperately trying to have their own like mini MCU within like the Spider-Man verse. But it makes sense for all these Marvel characters to have spin-off movies and shows and stuff, apart from Iron Man 2008, because like they are their own heroes in their own right. Not to say that these characters aren't, but they're very much tied to Spider-Man. So every time you splinter off these characters to their own project, it just gets really messy in my head, honestly, and it gets more noticeable, especially when Spider-Man doesn't show up in any of these projects.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. They just kind of feel like side adventures to me, and they don't get me excited. They like most people, I feel like they just make me like face palm for Sony. It's like, no, dude,
Mm-hmm.
don't do this.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I think there are some exceptions to that. Like, I think some characters could absolutely lead their own thing. Divorced from Spider-Man, we all know I'm a fan of the way the Venom movies work. So, yeah, I think it's possible. And I did some brief reading into this character because there's like a few versions of Madam Web, and people are expecting. Because like Madam Web is usually portrayed as an older woman, like an elderly woman, and Dakota Johnson I think is like in her 30s, but there's a version of Madam Web who started as a version of Spider Woman, who, despite the name, I don't think is really tied to Peter in the comics at all. And then this character becomes Madam Web, the overseer of the Spider Verse, essentially. So honestly, out of all these Sony projects that have been announced or like leaked or greenlit, this one I think has the most potential, and I'm kind of the most excited for, because if, like we were talking about, this is a way to ground the Spider Verse in live action, that opens so many more doors for the different crossovers, Venom and Tom Holland, or Andrew Garfield returning, or whatever, you know. So I think this one will happen. Out of like the Craven the Hunter movie and all that stuff, like this one will be a movie we see, I think.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'd rather just have this character appear in the Spider Verse, the live action Spider Verse movie, which will 100% happen at some point,
Mm-hmm.
rather than her. Like this will be a setup for that movie, and I'd rather just get to the meat and potatoes. Like I don't need this backstory for this character.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they could explain it inside that movie itself.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't know. It seems unnecessary. Hopefully, I mean, hopefully this is actually good, but I don't know. I have very little faith in Sony making good Spider-Man spin-off movies.
Yeah. So we'll see what becomes of the Madam Web movie, but in the meantime, we got to talk about Daredevil.
A perfect show, Christian.
In my heart, yes.
For one season, maybe it was.
Sure. So Daredevil season 2, we watched it, and I have a couple questions I want to ask you. They're very broad stroke questions. Obviously, spoilers are up here. If you haven't watched Daredevil season 2, come back for this discussion later. The first question, since you had seen season 2 in full before, and from our last discussion, you seemed like lukewarm on it. Has anything changed? Like, are you hotter or colder on season 2 of Daredevil now than your memory led you to believe?
No, I think I feel exactly the same.
Okay.
I never really loved this season. I think I like parts of it, which we'll discuss. But yeah, I kind of feel the same. Season 1, I think, is immaculate. And season 2 has a lot more issues and is good to follow up with the characters, but at the same time, there's a lot going on in this season that I don't particularly care for.
Sure. The follow-up question, because I think we were on the same page with this last week. With season 2 of Daredevil, maybe not living up to season 1, how do you feel with season 2 of Daredevil comparing it to other Disney Plus Marvel shows? Like, do you think that like it's still Daredevil, so it's better by default than some of the ones we've seen so far, or do you think it is more middling like some of the Disney Plus shows that didn't hit for you?
Yeah, I would probably say the latter.
Okay.
It feels very bloated. It's 13 episodes, and it was a slog, I gotta be honest, to get through. Like, I finished season 1 like well in advance of the podcast, and season 2 I had to like cram in towards like the end of this past week. Like I started a couple weeks ago, and then um, I was like, I just tailed off. Like I was not excited to sit down and watch season 2, so I had to watch like a few episodes a night this past week, and I was like, oh man, it's kind of brutal.
Yeah. For the most part, I agree with your takes on both. And I remember where I stopped before because I remember wanting to watch the first couple episodes of Punisher for, I think, something I was looking into for a video, and to get ready for it, I was like, oh, he was introduced in Daredevil, and I never finished season 2. So I went back and watched the first like 4 or 5 episodes, I think, dealing with Frank. But having seen season 2 in like its entirety, it it feels more MCU than season 1, and I think what I mean by that is what you said, the bloat, in that it feels like it's backdoor pilots for like 8 different things.
Yeah, yeah, it really is,
Yeah.
and it like genuinely is.
Yeah, it
That
is.
like that this was set up for the Punisher, absolutely, and the Defenders.
Hmm.
Which, if you don't know, the Defenders like picks up from with the end of this storyline and bridges the gap between season 2 and season 3. Like, no spoilers, but season 3 picks up with a very direct uh like reference to the Defenders. Like it's dealing with the aftermath of that show.
Yes, and for those following along, Defenders is next on our watch list, correct?
I think it should be, yeah. I don't
Yeah.
if it was skippable, I'd say maybe we should skip it, but I think we need to watch it in preparation for season 3.
Yeah, I've never seen it, and despite the downfalls of season 2 of Daredevil, I still have a blast watching Charlie Cox be Daredevil. So even if it's just 8 episodes, I'll take another 8. You know, who's to say if we're gonna get anything else with him meaningful in the future? I'll take 8 episodes of a week show with him. You know, because he's just great as the character.
Yeah, and the prospect of him bouncing off of other smaller
Yeah.
heroes in New York, that's pretty cool. I watched it and I think I enjoyed it, but it's very forgettable.
Sure.
So I feel like it's going to be similar.
So behind the scenes with season 2 of Daredevil, I don't know if this is the reason for it, but Stephen D. Knight, who did showrunning duties for season 1, was not the showrunner of season 2. I believe Jeff Loeb was still involved, and Drew Goddard, who adapted Daredevil to Netflix, was a consultant on this season. Where do you think the blame lies? Because we know that Marvel TV was acting separately from Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios in this era. Like, do you think this was a byproduct of them wanting to establish their own pocket universe on Netflix? Is that the end of it, you think?
It's certainly possible. I think the issue for me with this season is the writing, particularly with like the hand and dealing with that whole subplot. It feels more grandiose than what we were used to with season 1. Season 1 was very, very grounded, and they introduce a lot of things in this that make it seem more than it is. It makes it seem more than Hell's Kitchen, which I think leaving that focus was kind of a mistake. You have it here in the doc, but it's like this season is very much split up into 2 sub seasons, and the first part is very good, featuring the Punisher and focusing on Frank, and the second half dealing with the Hand and Elektra is just, for me at least, not very interesting, and it's something I didn't really care to tune in to every week.
Sure.
So I think it was more the writing and maybe the pacing than anything.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Because, like you said, John Bernthal, I think, is incredible as the Punisher. I was introduced to him through The Walking Dead back in like middle school. And I remember when I heard he was cast as Punisher, I was like, they got Shane from The Walking Dead to be the Punisher. And like, I hated Shane in The Walking Dead, so credit to John Bernthal, who's also like an incredibly kind human being. Like, he's very proactive about a bunch of things. He's a great dude. And then playing Frank Castle, who is this like awful human being on his own crusade, I think he kills it in the role. And I think I know it's a setup for his own show, but like him in the dynamic here really makes Daredevil and Matt shine in terms of something he struggled with in season 1, where he was trying to find his line as a vigilante. So getting Punisher out the gate, I think, makes it very, very clear the differences between Daredevil and just a psychopathic murderer, you know?
Yeah, and he's one of those, like what you're saying, he's one of those actors who takes those roles and it's like, yeah, there's no one else who can do this as good. Like, we talked about Charlie Cox and Daredevil, and John Bernthal is 100% that for the Punisher. So, like, if he comes back, which I kind of hope he does, it has to be John Bernthal.
Yeah, oh, I absolutely agree. And I think from interviews and things I remember reading, like John Bernthal seemed very enthusiastic about the character and really happy with the experience. I don't know if he's had any comments or questions about returning to the role, but I remember him always speaking very fondly about the production. So I'm with you. I think it would be a mistake. Well, you can make a lot of mistakes, I think, with making the Punisher relevant again. But if they did it, I think it would be a big mistake to not have John Bernthal as the actor, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I think the disappointing thing is the first half of the season, I think, is honestly kind of great with the story they're setting up and how there's a power vacuum in New York and it's a war for Kingpin's territories. But they let go of that so quickly when it comes to the second half of the season. And I didn't really talk about this when we did our season 1 talk, but man, my least favorite episode of Daredevil season 1 was the Stick episode. I just don't like Stick. And
dude, me too.
the fact that he is the second half of the season sucks.
Yeah, something about that performance of that character just does not vibe with me.
Yeah, dude.
Like, I don't know what it is. I don't want to, like, it seems kind of miscast in a way. Like, I'm not super familiar with the character, but I can't see that performance being that character. Like, it seems off.
Like,
I just don't like it.
Maybe that's the point, because similar to Matt Murdock, like, he takes what he looks like to the advantage of his enemies, you know? But even still, I think it's just like the direction of Stick I didn't vibe with. I didn't buy their chemistry because there wasn't any. And I remember the first time I watched season 1 of Daredevil. By the end of it, I was like, I hope that's like not more of this show. And then when I rewatched it, when I saw the Stick episode, it was just called Stick. I was like, oh, fucking great. Here we go.
Yeah.
I hate that episode so much.
They set his like crusade and war or whatever up in the first season, so they do like mention it, and that's like the bulk of this season. But yeah, the fact that he is like a major focus along with Elektra in this, who, like, I don't really know how I feel about her.
I like Elektra.
I feel like I would like her if she wasn't tied into this whole hand subplot, and I think that is a large part of me like not really loving her character. I like her performance, and I like it makes more sense for Matt and her to have like a Batman Catwoman situation going on than it does for Matt and Karen to be hanging out and trying to date and all that. So like I appreciate that dichotomy. I think it's just the fact that she's tied to this organization that is much more like ethereal and like more difficult to understand, like what their motivations are, and them just being like not this grounded Hell's Kitchen organization. I think that loses a lot of its luster for me and her character. But other than that, I do enjoy her.
Yeah, like I like her relationship with Matt a lot. I think they have a good back and forth. It's very entertaining to see them go back and forth. But I like the comparison you made to like Batman and Catwoman because it's very similar. Um, and I think that is something that a season two should do, where we have our main character of Daredevil, and you're throwing a wrench in what we know about him and watching him, I guess, struggle to like where he is now personally, where he was before. And honestly, you know what? I think a maybe better comparison would be to Batman and Talia,
Yeah.
because there is that conflict of like, hey, Batman clearly still loves her, but like just because of what she's up to, he can't at this point in his life, you know? And I think that's a really interesting relationship to have for like a vigilante superhero. But yeah, anytime like she's involved, I was fine with it and I was enjoying the performance. That being said, I don't like the hand stuff either. And beginning of the season, they do set up this super interesting concept of like, hey, it's a territory war for Kingpin's stuff. But the thing is, like every single faction they introduce is not even a shred as interesting as even like Leland was in season one, you know?
Yeah. No, you're right.
So,
Yeah, it's just the second that John Berthal's character like goes behind bars and they're like dealing, I like all the stuff of like them dealing with his court case, but the second where he's like not the main focus of the show anymore as like the adversary and the hand starts showing up, it just really loses me. Like I don't even know how they would structure it, but I would much prefer the half of the season we got and then them dealing with the ramifications of the court case and then that's it. But yeah, the moment the hand shows up in Elektra, like I just not really am interested in that.
yeah, because I think it definitely slows down after Frank gets arrested. But the thing that I love about it is I do like courtroom drama when it's done well. And like it's still really interesting to watch them be lawyers. I think that's what something I really love about Daredevil is the fact that yeah, there's the cool action fight scenes, the vigilante stuff, but watching the legal system in a superhero setting work and just like the back and forth of a court case, I think is entertaining, and they do it well whenever it's done in Daredevil, I think so far. But yeah, after that, it really feels like it's two seasons. Like not even the same season split into two. It feels like it's two separate things.
Like Matt even got his like superhero pose when Frank gets arrested. Like he's on the
Hmm.
top of like whatever the cemetery is, and like he's like gazing down at the police arresting him. Like he gets that moment, and then like the next season opens up. He's like, let's start the court case. It's like, oh, okay.
Hmm.
Which I mean, like you're saying, I like all that. That is like some of the more interesting stuff this season, like him dealing with like the DA's office and all that. Um, but man, yeah, I feel like they wanted to tell that story, but they also needed like an action component.
Hmm.
They were like, oh well, that is resolved. We need some way for Daredevil to like punch people for the remaining 6 episodes of this season. So let's introduce this organization. Like I don't know, it just didn't really sit right with me. I didn't enjoy that, and the fact that we're leading into more of that with the Defenders does not have me interested.
Yeah, and I mean, the I was aware going into this for my first full viewing that people were not hot on season two, so maybe my expectations were so low that the Matt and Elektra relationship was enough to get me through the hand stuff entertained. So at the minimum, I'm just hoping that's a similar thing with Defenders, where it's like I like Kristen Ritter a lot, and I'm excited to see her character and Luke Cage, just them,
Yep.
and see how they interact with each other. Uh, because maybe that gets me to watch their shows at some point. But yeah, I think Daredevil season two still good, but man, compared to season 1, it is a disappointment, I think.
Yeah, it is, and there's like a lot going on in this show. Like Karen becomes a reporter all of a sudden,
Yeah.
which I think is funny.
Hmm.
It's like I studied journalism in college, and I just think that's so funny. Just being like, you know what, I'm gonna go from a legal assistant to I'm just gonna be a journalist now. It's like, nah, do you know how to write an article? I just thought that was funny.
Hmm.
I especially do not like Matt and her's relationship in this season.
Yeah.
It feels very forced in a way to get to the point where she like finds Elektra, and like I think they wanted to have conflict for Matt and Foggy and Matt and Karen to like for him to be distanced from them, and that was their way of doing that. And like at no point did I buy they actually cared for each other in like a romantic sense, and like I didn't feel like that was necessary in this season.
Yeah, because in season 1, there's definitely hints of chemistry, right? Between the two of them. And I think that,
There's chemistry between her and Foggy as well.
yeah. And I think, like, with her, like, her and Foggy, like, in season 1, I think was, like, very playful a lot. But, like, her and Matt
Right.
seemed like they got each other on a certain level where I could be convinced, but I wasn't, I think. And I think it's just, like you're saying, it feels like it was written in there just because they wanted to have a conflict with him and Elektra, him and Karen, and then creating that issue with Nelson and Murdoch. But yeah, it's like Spider-Man 3 syndrome where you're doing too many things at once. Like, save that for later. Uh, just not the time. Um, which is a shame because I really loved Karen in season 1. Like, she was one of my favorite characters to follow the storyline with. Um, and I think Ben Urich's absence is felt, honestly.
Yeah, it is. He was such a great character to like follow through with sort of like the B plot in
Mm-hmm.
that season. And yeah, I think you're right. So now we have Ellis, and Ellis is kind of just a dick.
Yeah.
Like he's fine. Like that's just his character, but he's not as compelling as Ben, and he's more of a support character for Karen than he is like an actual standalone character.
Yeah. Um, but I mean, at the same time, it's still more Daredevil, and I like seeing these characters together. Uh, Matt and Foggy's relationship this season. How do you feel about that?
I do like them sort of coming to a head.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's a natural progression from where we found them at the end of season one. I really the scene that sort of stuck out to me in this season was one of the opening scenes of Matt and Foggy walking down the street to work, like on like one of the hottest days
Yeah.
of the summer, and they're having like such a great time until Foggy realizes that Matt is bleeding, and that just like unravels them into a conversation of like, hey, why do you keep doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And Matt goes on a story of like, if I don't do this, people get hurt. And it felt like they were at such an impasse, like such this great impasse of they're both kind of right. And I think that was great, and I think they handled it well enough throughout the season. There were points where I feel like Matt could have tried harder to be a lawyer. Like you're gonna
Mm-hmm.
miss this trial of the century, as they kept calling it. Um, but I think I liked the conflict between Matt and Foggy. It made sense.
Yeah, I think in terms of too many things going on, that was one of the many things going on that worked for me. Um, in addition to the Frank Castle stuff and just the relationship of Matt and Elektra, but like I find it interesting that like that's kind of the only season long thread that worked for me. I don't know if there's any others that stand out to you because like Matt and Karen's back and forth developing didn't work. Matt and Foggy worked. Was there any other main like season long thing? Not just like I guess the territory war you could count, but the first half I think we're on the same page. Very strong. Second half very weak. and then the Matt and Foggy dynamic is good throughout the season.
Yeah, it just feels very inconsistent, or maybe not inconsistent, but there's just things that are dropped and traded for other things. Like Matt and Karen becomes becomes Karen and Frank, not in a romantic sense, but like in the same way that they're working more together in the show. It just feels very separate. Like there's a very clear ending of season 2 part 1 and a very clear start of season 2 part 2. And it feels that way, which is really unfortunate. Like it doesn't feel like a coherent season of television. It feels like two parts that like mesh, but they also like contrast in a lot of ways. And it's unfortunate. I wish they found a way to make season 1 part 1 just a little bit longer in tying up those loose ends without having to shoehorn the hand at the end of the season.
Yeah, and I think like they could have, but it seems like for the time the Netflix mandate was 13 episodes. I think it still is. I think Witcher is around there as well, but I think Stranger Things usually hits 9 to 12 or something like that. But yeah, it's tricky because like looking back, you see all these format things of when was this, 2015, 16?
Yeah, this season was 2016. Or yes, it was.
Like you see what this was, you see what the standard was at the time, and in hindsight, now seeing where Marvel television has gotten to, you wonder like, hey, if they didn't have to do this many episodes, it was just a Punisher season, this probably would have been as good as season 1 because they would have had maybe 8 episodes to develop it a little bit more and have a really strong ending point. And at the same time, it's like, okay, well, if we got a modern day Daredevil show, I don't think it would be exploring these things. So for that reason, I still enjoy season 2 because it's so different from what we get with Marvel TV. I think it still takes advantage of being a TV show, but it definitely has its pitfalls, and they're deep.
Yeah, if I had to grade this season, I'd give it probably like a 7 out of 10, whereas season 1 would probably be like a 9 or a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. Like maybe I'd give it like a 7.5. Not an 8. 8's too high, but yeah, season 1 is that 10 out of 10 gold standard.
Definitely.
From memory, do you like Defenders more than season 2 of Daredevil?
The thing is, I've only seen Defenders once, so I have a
Okay.
very foggy, no pun intended, memory of the Defenders, like what even the plot line is. I have like a decent idea of what I remember it being. I feel like I enjoy like the interplay a lot between the characters, just seeing them together. So I think I will probably end up enjoying the Defenders more. It's also shorter, so
Yeah.
I think that'll probably help with the bloat.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I guarantee you when we talk about Defenders, it's going to be like, man, what if this pacing was what season 2 was? You know?
Yep.
So my one hope for Defenders is I know Danny Rand is in it, but the best part of the Iron Fist show was Jessica Henwick, who played Colleen Wing. Really hope Colleen's in the show because she was such a great character. She was so cool.
Did you watch Iron Fist?
I watched like the first 3 or 4 episodes, I think.
Okay.
And then I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's doing what Arrow did, but worse.
Oh yeah, because he's like a wasn't he like a rich?
He's a rich kid that gets stuck on some isolated part of the world and learns to survive and be a fighter, then comes back into the city
Okay.
with a crusade to save something. Like, it's the exact same plot as Arrow, but just so much worse.
Gotcha.
So, Colleen was dope, though. So, more from her, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have decided to rank Daredevil in the MCU after we're done with it. So,
Yeah. This has a this definitely brings it down. Definitely brings the overall quality down. But season 3, I remember really enjoying.
okay.
So maybe this is just a footnote in the Daredevil story.
Yeah, like if season 3 which I haven't seen any of, is even remotely close to season one, this is probably still going to be like in my top 5 of the MCU rankings.
Yeah.
Overall, it's just too good. It's so good.
Yeah, I remember enjoying season 3 like markedly more than season 2. So,
Yeah. How do you feel about the suit in season 2? Because I know we talked about it at the end of season 1 a little bit, but how do you feel about it here?
I still don't love the suit. It's nothing I like particularly hate. It's just not one of those like it's not one of those things where I see it and I'm like, "Yep, that's perfect." Like it's not the Spider-Man suit at the end of No Way Home or anything. The mask gets a little redesigned. I like it's how it's a little bit more sleek.
Yeah.
Yeah, other than that, I think it's fine. I love the Billy Club at the end of the season, though. That is a great video game upgrade that he gets.
Hell yeah. Big fan of that. And I'm with you on the suit redesign too, but I think it's very surprising to me personally as somebody who just like loves seeing updated superhero suits in different projects how much I prefer just the black Under Armour and mask. It's so weird because I love how Daredevil looks in the comics so much, and I even like how it looks this season. But maybe it's nostalgia, but there's just something about the book sock over the head, that just works.
Yeah, I have a feeling that that suit might just not transfer very well to live action. So like the very grounded, grungy look of him just running around in, black pajamas. I think that just sort of works.
Yeah. Again, not that I don't like the Daredevil suit they have, but
no, it's good. It's fine. It's nothing special though.
Have you heard the rumors about potential future Daredevil stuff in the MCU? Would he be wearing?
No, I haven't.
So the rumor is that he would be wearing I think, Frank Miller yellow Daredevil suit with like the red torso.
Oh, interesting.
Which I'd be curious to see how that looks on screen. But yeah, honestly, if they got a Marvel Disney budget now to give him the perfect Daredevil suit, just do it. Because I'm sure they'd kill it with whatever it is. But there we have it. That's season 2 of Daredevil. Any other things that we didn't talk about that you want to bring up?
No, this season was... I'm glad it's in the rearview mirror. It's not bad. Like I'm making it sound like it's really bad. It's just something I like didn't want to tune into for 13 episodes.
Yeah, which that can happen, I think, easily with binge watching TV. But when it's not working, it's not working. And that's not a discredit to what this season does really well, because I do think there's high highs, but yeah. I'd still rewatch a season 2 at some point. If I wanted to rewatch it all again, I don't think I'd skip. Maybe I'd skip the second half, but I think I'd still watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
So that is season 2 of Daredevil. Next up is The Defenders. 8 episodes. I know you said it was a struggle to watch season 2. Do you want 2 weeks for Defenders or do you want 1 week?
I think we could plow through The Defenders because,
Okay.
We have a week.
Yeah.
It's an episode a day plus an additional episode. I think that is feasible as long as you agree with that.
Yeah, I think that works fine. Works for me.
All right. There you go.
This episode releases on February 5th. So as of you listening to the show, you have until February 12th, quick maths, for being caught up on Defenders to continue the watch along of the Daredevil story in the MCU. And very excited to continue this and get to season 3 and see where Kingpin goes and what's up with him. So,
hell yeah.
Jack, where can the Agents of Excelsior find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at FascinatedJack. Christian and I have our returning Pokemon series, My First Mon. We're talking about Pokemon Legends Arceus. Yes, we're an Arceus podcast, not an Arceus podcast, sorry. So if you have any interest in the Pokemon series, you can check that out. It's My First Mon, youtube.com/joyclicks, or on podcast services of your choice. Christian, what about you?
Sure, you can follow me on Twitter, TikTok at Chun2D2. Like Jack said, youtube.com/joyclicks for My First Mon, or the video version of Excelsior. They're each in their individual playlists. which you can access very easily on the channel. If you want the audio version of Excelsior, you can check it out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever you choose. Rating and reviewing, if you can, would be appreciated because it helps the show out a ton, helps us reach new people, and just takes a quick second to show your support. If you want to support us on a monetary level, you can do so by going to patreon.com/joyclicks at the $1 and $5 tiers. $5 will get you producer credit on every podcast we produce, like Aranista and Jose Garcia, so thank you very much. And that is it for Excelsior. We'll be back next week with Defenders in review. I can guarantee you there will be no Avengers news next week to talk about.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
So, look forward to another Netflix Marvel heavy episode, but until then, Excelsior.
Excelsior.